the kids in our program, when I ask them who normally is the captain on your minor team, and they go, "Oh yeah, the coach's son." So, do you like that? No. So, I think it's a worthy thing to do, to go through that process. But as I mentioned, even like at the higher levels, and I see this in business all the time. And one of my friends who just retired from the police force in Minneapolis, you move people into leadership positions and you don't give them any training on how to do it. And then you're surprised when they fail. So anyways, kind of fun to think about all these things. So
I've got mentoring a AAA girls team. Tom Malloy was coaching not Tom Malloy, a friend of mine, Keith Fagnan, was coaching the team, and I'm mentoring him. And the way Girls Hockey Calgary ran at that time was the veteran players, they played the power play and the penalty kill, and the new players, the leadership was sort of predetermined by the age and ability to a degree, but the behavioral leadership from those girls, the so-called best experienced older players, it wasn't really, in my mind, good leadership, but they were the ones that. So when we had an early season exhibition game and hadn't decided on captains yet, and I talked to the head coach about, it's time the week before to start thinking about it. And two of the executives, both ladies, came into the dressing room before the game and berated us for not naming our captains yet. And I talked to them. I said, look, we're in the process of establishing that. And today is actually the day. And we had the girls write down without including themselves, write down their three choices in order.
Mm-hmm.
And then we added them up and looked at it ourselves. And two of the girls that were on top, we sort of agreed with. They were your congenial, everybody liked, communicate, appeared to be responsible and caring, and they were not the best players, but they were good. They were good. So, of course, Keith ended up naming them captain. But by the end of the year, Keith didn't finish his job. He had other problems that were going on that were personal that took him away from the job. And Tom came over and took the team halfway through. And we stayed with that group, but the veteran players basically ran Keith away from the coaching task. They just spoke out against him and swore at him in the dressing room. It was like, oh boy, what's going on here? But the two people we had as captains, they both went to college and they never finished. One of them never finished the first year. The other one quit hockey after 2 years.
Mm.
They were good players, but they weren't committed to play at the highest level and do what it takes. And we had no idea of that. So it makes me think twice about picking captains and getting to know your players better. But when you pick them, Rick, do you pick the oldest players, the player that might be back the next year? Or because that team, we had 3 15-year-olds that were the most talented forwards. And the way we managed the bench was my philosophy of everybody playing. And I don't think the older players like that. And it changed culture of the team to suddenly give everybody an opportunity to play. But is age a factor there? Have you ever had a second year player who's got another year left be a captain, Rick?
I have, age has seldom been one of the top criteria for me.
Yeah.
It's more on how I perceive the player and how the rest of the group does. So yeah, I've had team situations where my captain was not amongst the more skilled players, but he was a hard leader. He was an intelligent kid, and he wasn't intimidated by the role. He understood that he wasn't, pardon me, a top skilled player, but he knew he had a place and he knew what that involved. Pardon me. And he executed admirably. It's not something I think that you take lightly. Pardon me. I believe there's an expectation that every team needs one. Players expect it. As you alluded to, Wally, the group came in on Keith, excuse me, whom I happen to know as well, and we're making demands. That to me would have been a huge red flag right there, and I would have done whatever I could to manage that from that point forward. But it's something, again, you have to have a purpose in your process, and you have to be able to explain that to people. And when someone challenges you on it, say, this is the exercise we performed to reach this decision. We're comfortable with it, and stand by it. As I say, I'm not comfortable at all if you have to reverse on one of those along the way. So a lot of pain goes into doing it right the first time. No guarantees, but if you make the reasonable effort to get things right, there's a good probability that you'll minimize any issues around it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you've got to involve the players. So I mean, it's
well, for sure,
especially with on the girls' side. I mean, for down here, we'll have high school teams with eighth graders on it. You got 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and some of these girls, sometimes some of them start as 7th graders playing on a high school team, and they're in a locker room with a bunch of older girls. And being a male coach, you can't go in that locker room, so it's hard to know what's going on when they're all together.
Yeah.
And I think in our program here, the coach was bringing younger girls up. You bring the top 4 girls out of you take them out of the U15 program or 12. Almost immediately, 3 or 4 junior level kids would quit the team immediately. And that went on for 4 years. And so that coach is now coaching the boys. I think there's a big difference in the boys and girls in terms of leadership issues and captaincy and how you go about it. The other issue is, what do they do? They don't have any there's only one on ice decision that a captain can make. And that's when you have multiple guys in the penalty box and that went in at the same time. And when a goal is scored and one of 3 are allowed to come out, I think the captain can help the referee decide which one comes out. But how often does that happen? Maybe once every 10 years, yeah. At least in the U.S. rule book. So, high school age players, I mean, they're very tribal. Older kids over younger kids. There's a power relationship that goes on in that. I don't know. If you're right, Rick, you got to get it right. You got to do the best job you can to get it right, and then you can't just make them captains and walk away. Now you got to work with them on an ongoing basis, and you got to teach them, and you've got to mentor them during practice. You've got to mentor them in the locker room and help them to, learn leadership skills that they should. And I think that's one of the most appreciated, not enough attention's paid to that kind of stuff. The first year I had the high school team, I had a boy, senior, and another kid on the team left his shin pads back at our rink for an away game, and David, the senior, had a cast on his hand because he had broken something, but he was playing, and without anybody saying anything, he while we were getting ready for the game, he actually took his shin pads off, walked down the locker room, and handed them to the other kid who didn't bring his. And then he took his stuff off, and I said, David, what? He goes, the team needs him more than the team needs me. So at the end of the season, we had a conversation with the returning players to talk about captains. And I said, what exemplifies a captain in your mind? And they all went, David. He was the best captain ever because he cared about this hockey team. So that was it's a great lesson, a great thing. But then I had a kid, I had captain one year, and he was our best player. His dad was a professional baseball player, as a pitcher for the Twins, a couple other things. He's a wonderful kid with great hands, great feet. But we had some younger kids on the team, and they didn't like him and chirped him all the time. And he came into me and he goes, I don't want to be captain anymore. I go, what? Says, I just want to play. And these guys are driving me crazy. They're disrespectful to me. And he says, I don't need this. I don't need this in my life. I said, okay. I can respect that. And he, I don't know how many years he played for us, 3, maybe 4. He was the all-time leading scorer in our organization up to that point, and he just didn't want any of that nonsense. I'm sure his father was giving him. His dad was a great guy. I'm sure his dad was just giving him some, real good, sound advice. And says if this doesn't work for you, then ask the coach if you can just step away. So we did. So, every year is another journey, right? With another group of kids.
I believe that's correct, that each situation is unique and offers its own uniqueness in different ways.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned it earlier, you don't want to burden a player with that load if he's really not willing to take it.
Yep.
So again, it's knowing your group to the best of your ability and making your decisions with that as